about some of the dangers.
Sorry.
We talked about, that's okay. We talked about some of the dangers along the way, and we talked about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And we talked about how really those can damage and start to take us off of the path of oneness with one another. Our third session, last week's session, we talked about where we've been, and how we did that was that we talked about our family of origin. Mostly I talked about my family of origin, but helped you and walked you through what assessing your own family of origin, mostly for emotional patterns and how they responded to one another, some of the cutoffs and divorces and marriages, and how many years were they married. And we looked at that because our families of origins really have a way of impacting, and we basically inherit the way we are in the world through our family of origin. How we love, how we expect to be loved, how we express love, how you treat those around you. So it was really important to reach back, look there, see what patterns may exist from our families of origin, to really identify some of the things that we will probably have to work through in our own lives, in our own marriages. And it's important to do that with our spouses so that we can see what the challenges are going to be, or have been, or will be, depending on where you are in your journey, you know, from their side. So I'd like to ask just one person, can you give me a takeaway from last session? Anything that stands out to you that was, you know, that stuck with you? Any thoughts? Yes, Alicia.
I would say that the most prominent thought is that we can change our DNA with our actions and our decisions. That was incredible to hear that, with positive, purposeful action.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a huge takeaway because it gives us hope. It doesn't allow us to sit in the place of, wow, this is where my family is, this is what the patterns have been, and therefore that is what I'm going to repeat. I can't get away from it. But no, by purposeful action, by behavior, by a decision, together with your mate, on the same page, on the same path toward oneness, you can certainly make those changes. So thank you for that, Lucia. That is absolutely, absolutely a good takeaway. So what we're going to do today, you know, and I honestly, I'm still trying to figure out how it's going to go, because how many of you were able to look at the session and see the questions that were on there? Anyone?
Who did their homework assignment?
Who did the homework? We have a few. Okay, we have a few.
Sometimes
Okay.
this happens to me when I'm doing the premarital sessions as well, Sophia. So we
Oh,
just
it's
take
okay.
the time to read through all the questions, and then if people say, "Oh, that's a good one, let's stop there," then we do.
Okay.
So.
Well, that's what I was hoping to do, and we can certainly do that here and there. What I was hoping to do was sort of combine this session and next session, you know, that's in our book. And so making today part 1 and then next session part 2, because they kind of tie in together. And I was expecting that not everyone possibly had the time to look through some of the questions, and that's okay. And also not everybody is married. And so, so yeah, so we'll see how that works. And toward the end of our time together, we will start to go through some of those, through the questionnaires, and yeah, maybe see how it goes from there. So, and then I wanted to talk about our last session, which is quickly upon us. Like, I feel like it's gone so fast, but it's just 2 weeks away. But maybe wanted to get some ideas about a particular topic that you wanted us to focus on within the marriage context. Maybe something we kind of flew by, something that stood out, something that you have. I thought maybe that we could do that in session 6 and maybe have a longer discussion. I don't know. So maybe we can kind of play that by ear. So just to give you an idea of where we're going possibly, yeah, so I'm going to share my screen with you here. I have a presentation. And here we are. Can everybody see it? Sorry, let me get you guys. Let me open your faces here so I can see you. Okay. So where we are, we've talked about where we've been. Today we're talking about where we are currently. Those questionnaires that you went through a list of, and I'll start here. What is that doing that? Oh, I know why, because I'm supposed to play. There it is. Okay. Those questionnaires went through some problem areas. Problem area usually at the top of everyone's list is communication. Would everybody agree with that? Nod if that's yes for you. Yes, communication. That is a challenge for couples. For all of us across the board, I think relationally can be a challenge. Many different reasons why. Just looking at where we've been in terms of patterns and relational emotional patterns, we can see that some of that is learned behavior. So communication, a big problem area. Problem solving, how to get on the same page, how to determine where we're going to go next, how are we going to sift through this problem, even just getting on the same page about how we're going to move through this difficulty can be a challenge. Finances, yes, a big one for everyone. Has this been a challenge in your relationship at any time? Yes, some no. Finances, really, really important, and can be a difficulty if we're not on the same page. Parenting, another big problem area. If conversations are not had prior to a relationship, or rather to getting married and really figuring it out. And then there's obviously some times where you just can't possibly attack and talk about, strategize about every single thing, especially with parenting, that is going to come up. I think another one that I didn't write up here that is associated with parenting is blended families, that situation. So if you are a step parent, that can be challenging as well, and a big problem area for some. In-laws, how to navigate the in-law relationship. Sex, another big problem area, if that we're not on the same page about, can get in the way. Ethnic and religious differences. This can be particularly difficult for families that have different ethnicities, and also people who do not have the same religion, couples who are not of the same religion. So, and finally, friends. So these are some of the areas that are identified in Dr. Philip Mamalakis's book. And if you had a chance to look at the questionnaire, then hopefully you've already identified. And most of us don't really have to go through a questionnaire to really identify what are the big problem areas that we are struggling with in our marriages. Oh, there was one more. Personal time versus couple time. So I wanted to kind of veer off a little bit from the book and talk about positive conflict resolution. And I'm sorry, positive functions of conflict. And a lot of times when we look at conflict, we tiptoe around it. We are careful to avoid it. And sometimes the reasons for that, there are many reasons why we avoid conflict. But some of those can be, can really get us in a place where we are stuck in our relationships because we will not face conflict in a positive way because we don't have any positive framework for conflict. So today we're going to discuss about 8 positive functions of conflict. What good can come from conflict? Hold on, let me move here. Whoop. Where is my mouse? Oh, there we are. I'm sorry, your guys' window is in my slide and I can't find my mouse. Holy cow. I can't find it. Okay, here it is. Let's see. There we go. There we go. We'll do that. All right, there we go. Using energy rather than repressing it. So when we decide to deal with conflict, one positive thing that can come from it is using the energy rather than putting it away. When we put conflict away, when we repress it and we don't actually decide we're going to deal with it, it actually starts to snowball. Anybody ever experienced that? Yes?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Number 2, using conflict creatively to raise new questions and ideas. So conflict becomes an opportunity, a space for us to question, to be curious, to stay curious about the other, about what this particular situation might be saying or bringing up about the relationship, and staying on the positive side of that. Surfacing heretofore hidden thoughts and feelings. So, in other words, things that we have chosen to not talk about, that are in there, but because of whatever reason, and this goes into the repressing things that we have not discussed. So when we decide to face conflict, to move through conflict, it can reveal some of the hidden thoughts and feelings, and maybe even things that you didn't even realize were there and present for you. Now, I'm moving quickly through these, but if you have a comment or anything that you'd like to ask, please stop me. Number 4, creating new methods in the couple for handling conflict. So deciding to move through conflict gives you an opportunity to deal with it in a different way, particularly from moving away from the way your family of origin, from some of those patterns that we identified, we talked about last week. It helps us to create new ways to deal with the conflict.
Can I ask for a clarification, Sophia?
Sure.
So conflict, you would define, or we should define, as just when we arrive at a circumstance or situation where there's not an agreement about how to go forward, that there's a difference of opinion having to do with kind of an action to take.
Correct.
But it's not at all the same thing as an argument, right? An argument would be just one manner of addressing a conflict, which is not necessarily a very productive one, right?
Correct.
So,
Absolutely.
so in a sense, conflict itself is something that we can anticipate, and going through these things, you're almost showing us that there's a good chance we can grow as a couple and grow in unity with one another when we arrive at these differences, that the differences are the opportunities at the same time to grow and to work towards unity.
Absolutely. Often, and as I mentioned before, excuse me, a lot of us have a negative disposition towards conflict. And so there's no question that there are going to be disagreements, that there are going to be things that we don't see eye to eye, as many of you have already experienced in your marriages. There's no question. The issue here is for us to look at conflict as a resource, as an opportunity, as a tool to move us through to another level of intimacy, really. We're going to get into a little bit further, some of the do's and don'ts and some of the fair fighting tools. So we'll get there.
Okay.
Thank you, Father Patrice. Number 5, reassessing power in the relationship. So a positive function, we look at, okay, wait a minute, who is the one who has been kind of moving us a little bit more strongly in a particular subject than the other, and the other person has maybe, and this might be a strong word, but being bulldozed, so to speak, So it gives the opportunity for that particular person to say, hey, wait a minute, I have a voice. I'd like to be heard. I'd like for you to listen. Number 6, creating a climate of cooperation. So this sounds and everything that I'm saying, I understand sounds very beautiful and neat. And like I'm putting it in this box, like it's so easy to attain. And please, I'm not being insensitive to how very difficult this can be in a practical sense, But again, this is what we are trying to do. This is a life's journey of deciding to move through and practicing these things. So creating a climate of cooperation, it should bring you a positive function of conflict, hopefully is bringing you together in that oneness that we talked about, that God intended for our relationships to operate in. So creating a climate of cooperation. Number 7, learning to see problems rationally. I can speak for myself, as a woman, and this is a generalization, but I can be emotional initially, when I am experiencing something that I am having trouble with. And so, a positive function of conflict can be to learn, to practice, to come down from those emotions, and really start to look at this problem, this situation, this opportunity in a more rational and clear way. And I'm not saying that this is not the case for males, but, again, just speaking for myself. Number 8, renegotiating old contracts and changing expectations in the relationship. I really like this one because there's a tendency for us to fall into, well, this is just the way we've always moved through difficulty. This is always the way we talk about disagreements. This is the way we always, or whatever the case may be, things that have been in place for some time that sometimes have outgrown where your relationship is. And so a positive function of conflict can be, let's look at this. Let's look at if the way we've been doing things is still working for us. Are we holding on to old expectations that we had discussed previously are unrealistic expectations? And so when we decide to face conflict, to move through conflict, it gives us an opportunity to look at those things again and to make a decision together that we are going to move to change because we've outgrown it, because it's simply not working anymore. Does that make sense? Everybody following?
Sounds good.
Cool. So steps to fair fighting. Oh, there it is. Okay. Sorry, I finally figured out how to move this thing. Steps to fair fighting. So I italicize the word fighting just because I don't like the word fighting. I use that word loosely because fighting has this negative connotation of, you know, almost like arguing when we're talking about describing the way we are entering into a disagreement. Well, right now we're saying fighting as though it's a very confrontational and sometimes very tumultuous situation. That's not what I'm saying here. It's just simply to give you an idea of when we disagree. That's probably better said. So
Fair conflicting.
there you go. Fair conflicting. So number one, reactivity is the enemy of constructive fighting. Why is this? Why do you think this is? Anyone? Reactivity is the enemy of constructive fighting.
Usually comes from a place of anger or defensiveness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Defensiveness. And those are what part of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? Some of the unhelpful ways to speak and to interact with our significant other. Reactivity is the enemy of constructive fighting. So instead of reacting, what I'm suggesting that we would do is cool off and self-assess. On a scale of 1 to 10, all you have to do is put your hands up, okay? On a scale of 1 to 10, how difficult is it for you to get yourself out of a situation, let's say a disagreement that's about to take off? You know, it's about to go there where it's going to become something that is, you know, heated and perhaps, you know, what do I want to say? Very, just a very volatile, you know, disagreement. On a scale of 1 to 10, how hard is it for you to walk away when that is about to happen? 10 being the hardest. 8, 10, 10. Who's shaking their head over here? Wait, who's that? George. He's shaking his head. 2 for hubby, for Stevie's hubby.
It's true. He's really good at it. I'm not.
Good. Oh, good. Okay. Well, okay. And that's typical, I think. George, what about you? What number would you give yourself? Because I see you laughing over there, so I'm pointing you out.
7.
7?
Yes.
Were you saying, which George were you asking? You can ask them both, but
Yes, both.
George
Okay,
with a
7.
J or George with a G? I think it was George with a J who was laughing.
It was, but go ahead. George is 7 with a G. Okay, George with a J. What number would you give yourself?
Having trouble unmuting myself. Probably a 5.
5, okay. Okay, we'll leave that there. 5. Okay, so cool off period. I'm sorry, cool off is very, very difficult when you're when it's about to happen, when it's about to take off. I think that the way to come against that particular situation, and for those of you who have been with your spouses long enough, you know in advance that it's about to go there. You know, very rarely will it go from 1 to 10, from 0 to 10. It usually transitions to that place. And so I know that this is a hard thing, but it is worth the self-control, the difficulty it takes to practice the self-control needed. And it sounds like, sometimes for a couple, one person is better than the other. And so perhaps it is up to that person to say, wait a minute, let's take a minute, let's cool off, and let's come back. And maybe the burden is more on that person because they tend to be, they have the ability to do that a little bit better. And so maybe that's a suggestion. But I want to say, and here's the caveat to all of it, the cool off period should be as short as possible. Why is that? The reason for that is because there's a temptation for the person who likes to avoid conflict to not talk about the conflict, to stay away from the conflict, to make 24 hours turn into 48 hours and 72 hours, a week, 2 weeks, whatever that looks like. And so that cool off period should really be as short as possible, when possible. So
Doesn't that fit into stonewalling? Because that is what I think one of the concerns is, that person suggests that cool off, but that's part of the defense mechanism of not having to deal with it.
absolutely, yes, you are right about that. It can be stonewalling. So I'm not giving the stonewalling person or the person who has a stonewalling tendency a tool to say, oh, well, we got to stop. When we say cool off, we have to do that respectfully. It cannot be in the middle, of a situation where it is that where it further complicates the situation, where it disrespects the other person. It must come from a place of genuinely trying to avoid a potential blow up or a potential situation that is going to take us off of that path of oneness. So I say cool off and self-assess. Self-assessment is huge here. Okay, so I'm going to move us to the feeling wheel, which I referred to in one of our other sessions. This is the feeling wheel. So you will see that the feeling wheel, I don't know if you could see my mouse, so I can't see my mouse, so never mind. So you can see on the feeling wheel, the top half is the emotion, and I want you to look in the inner circle, the smallest circle. It's sad, mad, and scared. On the opposite side, you see the opposite of those emotions, joyful, powerful, and peaceful. If you look at mad and you look at powerful, they oppose each other because they are the opposite emotion. So let's say, for instance, you are just in a cool off period. Does it mean that you pull out the feeling wheel? I don't know. It might mean that, it depends what is helpful to you. However, or another reason why pulling this out is if you have difficulty naming why you're having this reaction. For instance, you are angry. Why are you angry? So you see it says mad in that inner circle. We're going to move to the second level of the mad circle, and we're going to look for a word that further describes why we might be mad. Hurt, hostile, angry, rage, hateful, critical. Perhaps some of the behaviors or the feelings that you're experiencing in that moment Then we move to the outermost circle in that red section of mad. And it says jealous, selfish, frustrated, furious, irritated, skeptical. This is giving us more language to try to understand why we are reacting the way we are. This is important in self-assessment because as we try to move through in a positive way, the conflicts in which we are trying to resolve, we want to be able to name, to understand what is the problem, what is going on with me, and why am I so upset? So then we can communicate that positively to our partner, so then we can come together and then agree on how we're going to solve the situation. What contract are we going to make to move out of this particular issue? Anybody have any questions about how to use this wheel?
Yeah, I have a question. Opposing mad, you have powerful. I really don't like that powerful. I mean, that kind of makes it negative. I mean, I would prefer substituting from the outer will, cheerful, spiritual. But for me, powerful has a negative as negative a connotation as mad.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, I don't think either spouse should want to feel powerful in regards to the other.
Maybe empowered is a better word. What
Okay,
about
that makes
empowered? Yeah, empowered might be a better word. Because I understand powerful, that, can denote, standing over someone, and, so
Right.
yeah, so maybe empowered is a better word. Mhm.
So the mad, the opposite there is when we're mad, we're kind of out of control, where the powerful men, we kind of have this self-control. So I wonder if a word like meek actually might also be a good opposite, because the meek person is not the weak person, but the person who just has that much of a understanding of what's really happening, and a perspective that they don't see the other person in an adversarial way.
Mhm.
But then it has proud there. So how does that tie in?
Yeah, I didn't like the word proud either.
There's a kind of a love that's also proud, like parental love, storge.
Mhm.
When your children do something that you're really, kind of feel good about.
Yeah, I think that is what it's leaning towards. Proud in the sense of you feel good about how you behave, feel good about the particular situation, feel good about the moment. I don't think. I think that I feel like if you want to splash that word out and perhaps put something in there that is more effective for you, because there is that negative connotation around some of these words, especially when we talk about spiritually and the disposition of our souls and how we. So, by all means, do that if those words are triggering you in that negative sense. But I can see. Pride would probably be more on the negative side, or rather it would be on the negative side. So yeah, not written in stone. Use it as it's most useful for you. However, it gives you an idea of what we're trying to get to, which is to further identify why we are reacting or responding in the way that we initially do.
So to see if I understand clearly, Sophia, when we experience conflict and it's kind of a heightened sense where we don't want it to melt down into something destructive or combative, then when we take a an amount of time to cool off, to separate. And this is a part of the self-assessment. Now we look at ourselves, then we get out our feeling wheel here, our feeling chart, and we try to find what word expresses best at that moment, what is going on in our heart.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
And this is giving us a visual to do that, because sometimes we can get to that place where it's hard for us to think, to understand why it is, to identify why we're feeling the way we are. The goal of this is to help you practice a pattern, a behavior, a positive one, because regardless of what you may believe, you are responding in a way that you usually respond in. So what I am suggesting is that we learn to respond in a different way and create create a pattern around a positive behavior, such as, let's get cool off. Let's take a moment to, again, not necessarily pull out the feeling wheel, but it's there for you to help you identify why you may be feeling, giving you some words, some vocabulary, so that you can further understand why you're reacting or responding the way you do. This may seem like it is, wow, I'm going to do that in the middle of, like, that just doesn't seem like it's realistic. However, this is the relationship that we've chosen to work out our salvation. We are sowing into making a decision, behavior by behavior, encounter by encounter, how we will, how we are going to walk on this path, how and where it's going to lead us, and the fruit that will come from that. And so it is, what I'm suggesting is different perhaps than what some of you may already be doing, or maybe not. And praise be to God if that is the case. However, I believe that this is something that is a useful practice that will give you some good fruit. Because once you have the vocabulary, once you can identify and express, understand why you're feeling the way you're feeling, you may not even need to further the discussion other than to just apologize. You may be feeling the way you're feeling simply because maybe I'm irritated from something that happened at work and has nothing to do with my particular, with my spouse. Maybe I'm responding in such a critical way because, I haven't resolved a criticism that I received from my supervisor, and so it may dead the conflict right in its tracks when you decide to really figure out what's going on with you.
Sophia, I'd like to share just a little bit of an experience that I had, and see if it doesn't help us to know what the next step is when we're like this. Something that you just said that I appreciated very much is that you said maybe we're just going to need to apologize. That would be certainly a change in perspective, that if in the moment of conflict where we are struggling with, for the most part, the behavior of the other person, or the attitude of the other person, or something that the other person has said or done, or not said or not done, there's very much still that sense of our expectation of how we want the other person to be and what we want the other person to be doing. When we take this time of separating apart, if we identify feelings that we're having, I think what you were suggesting is we can also take some more ownership, right, of those feelings, that as we mature emotionally and spiritually, we come to a greater and greater awareness that ultimately we are responsible for what's going on in our own hearts, not the other person. right? And that's where we use the analogy of the other person is like the mirror that shows us every day how we're doing in the spiritual life, right? And the experience that I wanted to share was I was with somebody who is divorcing their spouse yesterday, and hearing their side of the story, because they were the person who hadn't approached me, who hadn't been coming and trying to find a way to and so I had to give this person a long time to just kind of tell their side of the story first. But what really struck me, and it made me think about it again as I'm looking at this chart, is how much this person had determined that there was just no way forward with this other person, with their spouse. That all that they had in their heart for their spouse was anger, contempt, indifference. And even when they were talking about some of the positive things, it was very much, well, this we can do okay, but there's no way that I realized that my life was only going to be just this misery that I was experiencing because of this person's fault. And when a person gets convinced of that, it's almost as if they've already decided, how can I say, that there's no good things that come from conflict. There's nothing, like you said, the positive things that actually can come from this. And it's hard not to want to, for me, pastorally, not to want to, and I even look for the openings in a way to try to suggest to the person to look at something differently, or to look at themselves differently. Because almost always when we get, as some psychologists say, when we get caught in that box where everything's the other person's fault and nothing's our fault, it's almost a defensive way of not wanting to address ourselves, not wanting to look at what we might have done and all of that.
Thank you for sharing that, Father Petrides. There are some situations, and I think that what you said about the analogy of the other person, the couple, our spouse can be the mirror. If we really, sometimes that mirror is so painful. What we see in that mirror is so painful and so heartbreaking that we decide that we're gonna cover the mirror and close our hearts and our minds to that mirror. And unfortunately, as a therapist, it's heartbreaking, but also I have a sense of compassion for that particular person, because it is clear that there are some things that, and again, talking about family of origin and the way that people attach when they are children, early on in life, and how that sometimes really, really significantly impacts in such a way that it is extremely difficult to appreciate that mirror in front of them. They cannot even hear it. They cannot even see it. In those moments, and this is something that is important for us to identify for ourselves, but also for the couples around us, to be the accountability, to be that when we see people who have become so rigid and so stuck in that particular frame of mind, to say, hey, you might need some help, because that particular couple needs outside help to get out of that particular situation. Now, it will take a lot, because I don't want to get into all of the details of what I think that that particular person might be dealing with, but but if they respect you enough, perhaps your voice will move them to say, maybe I do need to consider getting some assistance, some support outside of my own ability and what I've been trying to do. So That's us, being loving our community around us and really wanting to see them not be in such or help them get out of such a difficult situation. So thank you for sharing that, Father Treaties. So hopefully this somewhat kindergarten-y looking visual will help in some way, because the bottom line is when we react, there's something else going on and we need to identify what that is and put words to it. So continuing on steps to fair fighting. When you're going to approach the problem and talk, after you've done the cool down, you've identified where you are, what the issues are, and it is in fact something that you need to discuss with your spouse, using I statements is important. We talked about this before in the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the criticism, the contempt, the defensiveness. There's a tendency to go, you did this, you always do that, you did that. We want to stay away from that language. So we want to make I statements. I feel hurt because, I was offended by you because. I statements. You can only speak for yourself, how you're feeling. Understanding the problem is important, and that's why that slowing yourself down, understanding why you're upset, it's going to be important, because that's the language, those are the words that you're going to use to come back and say, hey, this is what's going on. This is why I reacted the way I did. And even before you start with the I statements, you may need to start with an apology for your reaction, for the way you responded. So offer and agree on a solution. So if you're going to talk about the problem, or rather when you decide this is what has offended you, this is the issue, offer a solution that might be helpful for you to solve the problem. And then you will take the time to agree on that solution. The solution that you have posed may not be something that may be agreeable to your spouse. So do the work to talk about what might be a good way to move through this particular situation. That might be the opportunity for the other spouse to apologize, to clarify why they did or said what they did, and then to agree on a solution and how to move forward. And again, more often than not, it's about acknowledging that the other person offended the other person, and apologizing. And sometimes that's as simple as it is, but also difficult, right? So again, I would like to suggest these are, just advice on words to use, because words are so powerful in conflict. Choosing your words, slowing yourself down, it is extremely important, because words can be your greatest tool, but they can also be the biggest enemy. Weapon. That's the right word. Yes, the biggest weapon. So we want to choose carefully what we say. Consider how you may sabotage this agreement. So what does that mean? What that means is you come to an agreement and you already know in the back of your head, I'm not going to be able to do this tomorrow on what we agreed upon. If this happens again, I'm not going to be able to do this. So perhaps when you're talking about it, naming it and saying, you know what, I don't think this is going to work because we've fallen out. We've tried this before, and we do this and this and that, and then it doesn't work. Or how you yourself know and have gotten to know yourself that, no, this particular way of handling this is not going to give us long-term results. So consider how you may sabotage this agreement. And that might not happen in that moment where you're talking about it. It may happen a week, two later, maybe the next day. Be honest with your spouse and say, hey, you know, I thought about that further, and I don't think that's going to work for me, you know. But again, it takes some bravery to walk back into that situation, that particular disagreement, to come back and say, hey, I really want this to work. So I'm going to come back into this disagreement, which I really don't want to go back to. However, I'm going to do that for the betterment of our situation, of our relationship, of our oneness, so that we're not coming back here again in a tumultuous way. Any thoughts about what I just said?
I'm wondering if there's some other suggestions that could go along with these. And that might be that we pray before we speak again, or that even as a couple we pray together. Another might be holding each other's hands when we talk to each other, that we maintain some degree of physical contact with the other person. And another may be that we start with saying what we may agree with, or see what you know, see the point in where the other person is coming from. So there's a sense that I am actually being listened to first.
All great suggestions. You know your spouse. And obviously, yes, I didn't mention prayer. Absolutely. Even when you're doing the cool off, that is, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. You know, talking to God about where you are. So yes, looking at each other, the affection, touching one another, your hands, you know, that is already agreement. That is already a posture of moving toward the other. Praying together helps to come against some of that pride and some of the emotion, the negative emotion. So absolutely, great suggestions. Some essential do's and don'ts. Be specific about your gripe. So after you've had that opportunity to cool off and understand what's going on with yourself, be specific. Ask for a reasonable, ask for a reasonable change that will relive that specific, ask for a reasonable change that will relive that specific, did I read
You mean
that right?
relieve, not
Relieve,
relive.
that's what I meant. Sorry. It's like relive, that doesn't make sense. Okay. So ask for a reasonable change that will relieve that specific gripe. In other words, don't ask for something that is way beyond the grasp or the reach of your spouse. Something that you know is practical and will actually be able to happen. That it's not a setup for failure. Something that is beyond that spouse's capacity. So be reasonable. Speak of one issue at a time. This one is really important. It's really important. It can be very tempting to have a laundry list of things that you would like to discuss, that you would like to solve in that particular time, in that particular situation. However, one issue at a time helps to make things easier, and for it to realistically happen, or rather for the change, for the contract that you make together, for it actually to be realistic, for it to play out, to actually happen, it needs to be one issue at a time. Also, this is exhausting sometimes. These particular conversations can really draw a lot of energy, a lot of, and so when you're, okay, we fixed that issue, let's go to this one, let's go to this one, and let's go to this, and so, or even try to handle all of it all at one time, is unrealistic, and I believe can be damaging or hurtful, because then the other person who really is perhaps trying to come against their own discomfort with tackling conflict may not want to tackle conflict, simply based off of that it becomes a never-ending situation, never-ending conversation, a never-ending, resolution. Nothing resolves because it just keeps going, because it's issue after issue after issue after issue. So one issue at a time, and make an agreement that if there are other issues, we will put a pin in that and we will discuss at a later time, and actually hold yourselves to that, which will be important for the other spouse. Compromise should always be considered. So this is fundamental, getting your way, if you were the spouse that was offended or upset, or, and I will say that there are specific situations where, it is what it is, things need to be done a certain way, but I think that those are like big issues, the daily things that you might encounter. Compromise should always be at the forefront of how you decide to tackle the situation. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry. I don't know if there's a faster way to move. Counter demands can only be considered after initial problem has received a clear-cut response. So, going back to what I just previously said, trying to tackle more than one issue at a time, while it's tempting, it can be very challenging. But if you do decide that you're going to, one spouse wants to talk about one issue or even the same issue and then their side of the coin, perhaps, and it goes into something else, then that particular issue, the first issue needs to be resolved before you go on to the next. And that's the principle behind all of that. Again, I know I'm moving, fast through this, but in our part 2, hopefully we'll have more time to discuss and, hear from you guys as far as how you've, what your thoughts are and what challenges you have faced around what I'm suggesting or what you've tried. Never assume you know what your partner is thinking. Now, after 40 years of being married, it might be a safe bet to assume what you think your partner, but even at 40 years, you want to respect the other person by giving them the opportunity to express what they're thinking. Even though you might be tempted to say, I know what you're thinking. You may be right. However, You want to honor that other person by giving them the opportunity to share what it is that is on their heart and on their mind. So don't assume. They may surprise you. I will say this. It's so funny because this is something that I have learned quite a bit in talking to Cornelius. This is something I never like to assume that I know what he's thinking. I always have to take a minute because he always surprises me, even though I think I know. There's always something, nope, I was not right about that, you know. And so, you know, for me, it is, I've practiced and it can be challenging, again, when you get to know somebody, you know, to assume what it is that they're thinking. So. And avoid the 4 horsemen. We've said this time and time again: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and the stonewalling. Forget the past and stay in the here and now. Again, this is another big point, important point, because it is tempting to start talking about what happened 2 weeks ago, a year ago, you know, something. Stay present and stay in a particular conversation. You know, when we are practicing, you know, all of these things that I'm suggesting, you know, fall for me, and I haven't mentioned a lot of them until Father Patrides started talking about prayer and talking about, you know, but the assumption is that you are coupling your spiritual walk with some of these practical things, you know, and forgiveness. You know, when we have learned to practice forgiveness, and again, I'm not saying this like it's easy. I'm not saying this like it's not a heavy thing to do when you feel hurt by the other person. However, in practicing some of these spiritual disciplines, you know, it helps us to move through some of these difficult situations. And what I'm thinking about right now is forgetting the past and stay in the here and now. That is a spiritual principle. When we are practicing forgiveness of our partner on a daily basis, forgetting those things, forgiving those things, you know, is an important practice to help you when you are going to tackle some of these situations that you face on a daily basis. And if you have not forgiven, and if there is a situation that needs to be addressed, then it needs to be addressed so that it doesn't continue to come back and present itself in almost every single conflict that you face. Okay, there. Oh, that's my last one. So how are we feeling? I just gave you a bunch of stuff, and I'm happy to send out this presentation. I can send it to Father Patrides and he can send it to everyone. Because I know that I went through a lot of stuff here. But I really wanted to heavy load us today. And the reason for that is because I wanted to leave room in our next session to really start to tease some of these things out and see what they look like practically in your own life. I was hoping that maybe we could even do some role plays. I don't know how do you feel about that? But, you know, and it doesn't have to be with an actual situation that you're facing. But it could, or that it could be something that you already work through in your marriage. Yeah, I don't know. So I'm really open to what session 6 will look like, but I want to hear your thoughts. So let me know, where are we with everything that I have shared? How do you feel? What is your initial response to the heavy stuff that I discussed?
Sophia,
Yes.
thank you first for presenting all of this very helpful information. There's something that comes to mind when you were talking about discussing the conflict and, first taking a little bit of time to cool off, for example, if there's anger and resentment, all of that kind of thing. I feel like it's important to say that, because I know in arguments that I've had when I've, in my dating experiences, have been pretty much sort of like a struggle for power between the two of us. And it was like, we both have to be, I feel like two people have to be on the same page about vulnerability and being willing to put aside their pride in a sense, because I'm not sure if I'm not really sure why I'm bringing this up, but I just feel like if both people are not willing to put aside their need to be in control, that's really a big problem. That can prevent a relationship from further blooming in a positive way.
Mhm. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It can, the need for control can come from a place that oftentimes control is fear-based, and it's often coming from somewhere that you're afraid of something. However, it can really be a challenge and really come against a relationship when it is that either one of the partners is willing to relinquish control. Yes. So what I would say in that particular situation, if you came to see me and you said, Sophia, we need help because neither one of us wants to give up control. And, number one, I can congratulate you for coming to me and saying, hey, you guys think you need help. That's a good one. That's a good thing. It's a good, and that the other came with you. So that's a big deal. However, I often feel like the burden is on the person who has been able to recognize that is the bent, the thing that is happening in their own life. You can only control you. You can only be responsible for you. So if I am in a situation where I'm constantly hitting this brick wall with my significant other of, I always want control, I always need to have control, and you've assessed that about yourself, then you cannot be responsible for what that person has been enlightened or privy to about themselves, or what they've chosen not to be aware of about themselves, only for yourself. So then how do you counter that is by saying, acknowledging it, by saying, I am aware that this is what I am tempted to do. This is what I have been doing. And it takes humility and bravery and vulnerability to talk in that way. However, if there is a commitment to that particular relationship, then that's something that is needed in order for the relationship to succeed, to move forward. And it is hard. That is difficult.
Thanks.
Welcome. All of what I shared is, again, I don't really say any of it like it's so easy. I hope that is not the way that I am coming across, that what I am suggesting is just do it and it'll work and you'll be perfectly happy. And I am well aware and understand that first of all, that's not what I'm suggesting. And secondly, that this is a lifetime worth of work, that this is something that is practiced. You mess up, you get off the wagon, so to speak, you fall off the wagon, you get back on, you apologize, you get angry, you apologize, you come back, this is, it's a constant practice. It's a journey. It's what it is. Anybody else have something to share? Marlene.
I think.
Oh, sorry. Nope. Somebody.
No.
Go ahead. Go ahead, love.
Hello. I think that most of the points are really, really good and both difficult, but I feel like if at least in the union of marriage, if at least one person is working on it, I think that whole disposition will change the other person too. So the hope is that even if maybe the other person is not reciprocating the points that you're working on, that your work on yourself will reflect and start to kind of get them to, hey, there's something that's going on that's changing in my significant other. Maybe I can do something. And I mean, that's the hope, that, maybe, that the other person may not fall in line right away, but I feel like if one person is invested in doing the change, that the change will kind of spread.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good thoughts. It's that mirror again, right? That mirror coming up and saying, hey, if you're reflecting love, if you're giving love, if you're, humility, and so I think it hopefully will start to become exhausting for the other person, to be met with humility and love and forgiveness and being workable and being willing to compromise, and hopefully that it will, that disposition, as you
it'll be
mentioned.
exhausting to continue to fight.
Yeah,
Like the one to just
absolutely. Yep. Thanks, Marlene. Cornelius, did you have some words to share?
I know you pretty much hit it again with the humility. I was just going to speak on how it seems as if humility is their prerequisite going into all of this, and that's what I was going to say. And I was just going to speak about, how if we go in prideful, like I think you mentioned it, about if you go in this prideful, knowing in the back of your mind that you're not going to change, then there's going to be no, change, at least not right there on the spot, because you already made up your mind that you aren't going, that you don't want that growth, within your relationship. So that's what I was going to say. Yeah, I missed some of what you said. I got a call from the hospital, so I missed a good portion of it. But I think we'll get the video so I could go back and look at it.
Thank you.
It
Absolutely.
is a little bit hard to respond, Sophia, to what you shared, because it is it's more what's the right word? Instead of using examples that illustrate the points that you're making, we just had one point after another point after another point, and it almost takes a little bit more effort for us to kind of imagine or remember or come up with a situation in our own lives where we see the interplay of what you're describing happening. So maybe that's in a way what you want us to think about this week and digest. That may then we may share. And it doesn't have to be something where we're sharing things that are personal and we want to remain personal or private in our own marital life, but circumstances at least that have where we see what you're describing actually coming about. No, I'm struggling to find the right words, but you know what I mean. Examples.
I do. Yeah. It is. I know, and I said it several times. I know that I shared a lot of information. Yeah, so I'm sorry if it's bogging you guys down in a way that you're struggling. But hopefully you can take some of this information away, and maybe in our discussion time next session, we can again, tease some of them out, and really see what the challenges that you may have faced. Again, without, being so, you don't have to share specifics or details. However, we may not need to, I think after the 4th session, we don't have to record next session. So if that will help anyone, so you don't have to be concerned about that.
And we can also pause the recording. So if someone does have something that they want to share, but they don't want it necessarily repeated outside of this group and our journey together, then just hit request, and it's very easy to hit the pause. So we go into executive session, and then we can come back out into the notes being taken.
Absolutely.
Sophia, if I may, I'm sorry.
Sure.
If I may just add the parts that I did here, I believe the level of self-control that one must have, not to flip off and go, as Father Patrice was saying, taking that time to hold their hand. That's tough when this person, like, you're not liking your spouse or your significant other at that time, but to be intentional, to have that self-control, to stay in the room, 1, and then 2, to stay in it and know, I'm going to be intentional about this moment and being a present in this moment and not allowing my mind to run off into my own thoughts of everything I want to say. But I'm holding her hand, and I'm sorry, or his hand. Well, for me, her hand. And just sitting in it and learning to sit in it, learning to sit in a silence. The most powerful moments sometimes are the silent times. So just being able to sit in it and feel the weight of it. But understanding too that your partner may want to run. So how do you respond when your partner wants to run out of there? And just being mindful and being aware of that uncomfortableness that your spouse may be feeling. And how do you respond to that uncomfortable feeling that your spouse has? So just being mindful of like both sides. So that's something that I took away, is just the self-control that one must have. So, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not going to say I'm sorry anymore. So
Please don't.
I was going to say, along with that, Cornelius, I took my notes, which is crazy here, into an 8-step process. So you'd be proud of me.
Nice.
But I think that the hardest step, all that, is that first one, like you said, Cornelius. It's like the cooling, right? And I was trying to figure out, okay, so how do you take that first step? And the one thought I was having is that the opposite of a relationship is isolation. And it seems like when you do get an argument, you feel very isolated very quickly. I'm not understood or something like that. So I was thinking maybe the antidote is that I'm never alone, which God's always with me. So even if I feel isolated, I'm never alone. That might be enough of an antidote so I can cool down, look in the mirror. Maybe I can get to an apology. Maybe I can get to listening. Maybe I can get to the other steps, but that first step is the toughest one. And maybe it's just a thought. Maybe an antidote is, I'm not alone.
That's beautiful. I love that. I love
Sophia,
that.
thank you for all of this. It's very eye-opening. I guess from my perspective, it's quite a bit overwhelming, especially when we talk about, focus on one issue at a time. I kind of feel like we've got all these plates spinning and I don't know which one to go to first to address. So I think that's kind of my knee-jerk reaction.
Sure. Yeah.
Go
Yeah,
along
life
with,
is happening. All right.
let you finish your thought.
No, I was just going to say life is happening and it's really hard, because there are multiple things happening. And so it is tempting to want to tackle everything at once. And so that's all I was going to say. Go ahead.
To go along with Deacon Jim's point about realizing we're never alone and in those times, so not to be isolated, but rather to be turning towards God as we take a time out, is to reflect on what we've shared before, is what Dr. Mamalakis calls the sacrament of daily living, and that we can ask ourselves, am I turning towards my spouse right now or my significant other? Am I turning away from them or turning against them? And if we want to be turning towards them, the way that he describes that turning towards is always where we prioritize the needs of the other person over ourselves. So when we come back into the communication and facing one another again, our effort is to try to be open to and identify and looking for the need that the other person has in that, as opposed to what our own will and our own perceived need or desire. And even in that action, it may be very freeing from our struggle. May help us to be freed from our own issue.
Thank you for all the treaties.
If
I feel like they're, sorry. Go
I
ahead.
can, for example, see that my wife is afraid about something, and I don't want her to be afraid. I'm still like, that's my will, But if rather I can identify and say that her need at this moment is reassurance, not me to tell her you shouldn't be afraid. Or I don't want you to be afraid. For example, without saying any specifics. Or you shouldn't be angry. Well, maybe it's more helpful for me to start with, boy, you are really angry. You're really upset.
There's a joining in that. That's the posture that I'm hearing, is that you are choosing to join the other person versus stand across from them in a manner where you're just judging or assuming that you think, I feel like there's a couple other people that want to speak. Stevie, you've been putting your camera off and on. Did you want to say something?
Oh, thank you. I did, but I I don't know if I still feel this way. I was just going to say, like, the dynamic that Cornelius and Deacon Jim had just talked about with the reactivity, and then the other person, or that often one person tends to be reactive and the other person tends to be more silent and want to take space. seems to be such a common dynamic and so important to like many people had sort of strong feelings about it. And I guess I was gonna ask, oh, maybe next time could we unpack more specifics about how to like see the other person's perspective in that moment, but Father Theodore just kind of talked about it. Although I will say, yeah, I find that like knowing that I should pray, knowing that we should take a break, like rationally, I can think all those things in my mind and I will do it. And then I'll still like explode and be like, no, we're talking about this right now. And so like, I feel like knowing the right things isn't helping me. And maybe that's just like a place for more prayer. Maybe we don't need to talk about it anymore.
I mean, I think lots of us have been where you are, and it really is like growing a muscle, so don't beat yourself up too harshly. Just the desire to an acknowledgement to recognize this is something that might be getting in the way of conflict resolution. And that's my assumption in you saying that I'm not, but it takes practice. It takes practice. It's something that, you automatically jump to. It's an automatic reaction, just like an automatic thought that pops into your head and you just go with it. It's learning and practicing and growing that muscle, so to speak. And it is for the other person as well, growing the muscle of staying, of not going, of wanting to move toward the other person through conflict versus running away. That's a muscle that needs to be exercised as well, and needs to be, practiced and grown into. So that's certainly something that we can continue to unpack though. So good thoughts. Thank you. Mhm.
We are a little bit over our time limit and don't want to lose anybody before we wrap up.
Mhm. So thank you so much, everyone, for your patience in my longer session in terms of all the material that I shared. But again, next week, we'll have some more time for discussion. So please be prepared for that. Go back into session for the email that Father Petrides shared. If you don't have it, please let me know, let Father Petrides know, so that we can get that to you. And look at some of the questionnaires so that you can identify what are some of the most prominent areas that are a struggle for you. And we'll utilize some of the the tools, the things that we learned today to plug them into, the particular situations that you're dealing with, and see how we can work through those. So anyway, thank you so much for your time. And Father Petrides, I will give it to you.
Thank you, Sophia, for all your work you did this past week. Let's let it all sink in, and let's think about it, and let's look over everything. I think maybe we'll go ahead and share also. Hopefully we'll share the recording of this, but we'll share session 5, which really does just focus a little bit more on one of the several areas, and that's communication. So you can have a chance to read through that a little bit. Deacon Jim, will you lead us out, please, in prayer?
Yeah, my last comment was over 42 years. Every year I began to understand that it's my fault. So it kind of goes from 5% to I'm up in the 90s now.
Great.
So name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Lord Jesus Christ, thank you for giving us your sacrifice, your humility to rescue us. Help us become better partners with our spouses or possibly future spouses, that we might serve you and the other person in great love and humility. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Good night, everyone.
Good
Good night. Thank you.
Good night,
Thank you.
Father
See you next
Deacon,
week.
and everyone else.
Thank you.
Drika
God
and
bless.
Christine, do you
Yeah,
want to
thank
stay
you.
on a little bit? Are you able
Welcome.
to? Okay.
Who, I'm
great.
sorry?
No, I was talking to one couple that were on for the first time. Let me introduce you to them. I think I want to talk to them about something else as well. So Sophia, and good night, everyone.
Good night.
My journey of ministry started in the city of Chicago, and I went there, and I was there as a lay assistant for a year, a little over a year, and then as a deacon for a year, and then 3 years as a priest. And we still have many close friends from the city of Chicago, but that time of just beginning ministry was so blessed because God brought into our lives people that we were just kind of growing together with and starting out with in the faith. And one of them was our dear Christine, who at the time worked for, what was the name of the salt company, Christine, that you worked for? Morton Salt. So my children, we always, to identify her from the other Christines that we knew, we would call her the Salt Lady, Christine the Salt Lady. But Christine went on to meet Draco Pappas. Then they have a great love for the Lord, and they went and spent how long? It was a couple of years. Was it that long? In missionary work in Uganda, right? No.
Separate Uganda, but
Yeah.
together Albania.
And then Albania, and then together in Albania, right.
Wow.
Sophia, have you seen any of the previous sessions that we've had? She shared a little bit about her background and her journey. Christina Rodrigo, I did share some of them, but I don't think I gave you the passwords for anything or passcodes, so you might not have been able to see it.
I didn't see that, no.
But Sophia is now studying at St. Vladimir's, and
Sophia, what? I'm sorry.
you are studying now at St. Vladimir's,
Mhm.
and looking to continue your work in chaplaincy.
Mhm.
So really, our study is somewhat of a joint venture, because one of the courses she's taking at St. Vladimir's is a course in education, and she needed to find a classroom. So we've created this using some of her background as a marriage counselor, and with her degree and her master's in marriage and family therapy, and so forth. So I'm glad you could join us tonight, and I just wanted to have the two of you meet each other. I'm certain the three of you meet each other. I imagine your paths will cross again at some point.
Yes, I hope so. Thank you for being here. It's very nice to meet you both.
And I didn't
Thank you.
mention, but they're probably the furthest away, unless Maria is back in Palestine, which I don't believe so. They're in Wyoming.
Oh, wow.
Father, forgive me. I'm going to be 12 March if I'm blessed to be in the Holy Land. But you know what? The most beautiful place for a retreat for married couples, Taibe, the most ancient place in Palestine. So forgive me to advertise, because forgive me, but
No,
I
I
push.
totally agree with you, man.
Come to the Holy Land, have a conference, use Taiba Golden Hotel. Sorry, even if I'm not alive, beyond my lifetime, my children, I hope, will be there.
Yeah. Sophia, thank you so much for all your efforts. We're really appreciating the sessions.
You're welcome. I'm glad. Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure, really, and so grateful to Father Patrides to give me the opportunity to do this. It's been some time for me, and so it's really has honestly revived my passion for it. Because it had lay dormant for a little while. That I transitioned, had divorced, and things like that, and so this is my first time since then. Doing anything like this with marriages. And so I counted just like, I don't know, it's a joy, and I really feel like it's redemptive in some way. And so Anyway, I'm yeah, really grateful. So yeah.
Well, let's catch up this week. We'll find another time. Drico is hoping to go on a pilgrimage to the Holy Mountain, and so yeah, I
When?
wanted to talk to him. So
Okay.
Drico,
Yes.
when again is where you were thinking is in coming up in the next couple of weeks?
Well, yeah, well, our son is studying over in Florence, Costa, and my other son and I were gonna fly over and visit him on his spring break, and then we were thinking of going to the Holy Mountain, Athos, and to Albania. But it's looking more and more like we can't accomplish all of it in a week. So I think we'll just probably only go to Tirana, to Albania at this time, Italy and Albania, and then hopefully I can go with them one day to Greece and to Mount Athos and possibly to the Holy Land.
Well, it was great meeting you. I'll give you some time to talk. I'm sorry I didn't mean to stay on longer.
No, right.
You guys
Right.
have a good night. It was my pleasure
Good
meeting you.
night.
Thank you. Good
Good
night.
night,
Bye.
Tiffany.
Good night,
Good night,
Maria.
Maria.
Good night.
Good night. God bless you. Blessed Triodion.
you.
God bless you.
So my son, Father Alexei, did speak with Father Yakovos, and Father Yakovos had said that they're not accepting the pilgrims right now in a normal procedure, but that I could go ahead and still write Father Gervasios, who kind of is the second in command there at Simonopage, and just make that specific request. If they were to allow you, it would be that they would tell the office for pilgrims that you're specifically being invited as their guests to come, and then you would be able to get your Diamantiri and go through. And forgive me for just not attending to this before, but do you still want me to? Is there a couple of days as you think it still might work, or as you look at it now, it doesn't look so possible?
Forgive us for putting you in this position. And
no.
I also, I was contacting Father Anastas, who's basically he's the translator for Bishop Anastasios. I don't know if you ever met him.
He's Georgia Bendo's OCMC missionary's husband.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, when we were in Albania, we always talked about going to the Holy Mountain together, and I contacted him, and he was up for going, but found out at this time it's not a good time for them because Sister Ayero is close to death, I think.
Oh, okay.
She's 100 years old, and
wow.
the Archbishop didn't want him to be leaving at this time.
I see.
And but he was planning on going to St. Anne's. His father confessor is there. I guess there's a skeet of about 5 or 7 monks at that place. And I don't know if you've ever been there. He said his father, his spiritual father he's an architect and speaks English and but he thought it'd be good for me to go there with him. But anyway, at this point, I don't think we have enough time, and we should have probably looked into this, long time ago about.
Well, so then I want to suggest something else, and that is I am contacting them about going over later on this year, sometime in July, and there's a family, a father and a couple of son-in-laws and a grandson. Well, Trifon, Trent Orfanos and family from Maryville. That they're hoping to go over then, and also my kumbaro, Dr. John Mamalakis, and our godson Marcos. But if it was going to be 2 or 3 more, it would be you and your sons, and their father Anastas would be separate. I could include you, and I'm going to be. I don't know exactly what things would be like over the summer, but I'm starting the conversation with them about when in July might be a good time to come and how long we would be able to stay at Simonopatra and those type of things. Should I? Would that be something that would it all be possible and would interest you?
I mean, it definitely interests me. It's just whether I can do that, this and that, and I have to take my wife overseas for her 25th anniversary. And financially, I'm not sure whether we can do them all.
Okay.
But we can.
That was my thought, Father, that since this didn't all happen, that maybe they could go with you one day. That would be pretty wonderful.
I will keep you in the loop. So I probably will create an email group for this over the summer, and you'll see our communication and see when it looks like we might be going, and as we begin to discuss like costs and those type of things, and then you'll just see if it at all seems possible. Sometimes when we've done something like this, we've made arrangements for wives or others who are not coming to Holy Mountain to visit the monastery of Vermilia in Kalkiviki. So have the same, very much the same experience, but just in a women's monastery. So, but if it's your anniversary, maybe you want to spend all that time together. So.
Are you planning on going to Simenopetra or any?
Yeah, it would be Simenopetra, but we don't. They probably won't let us stay the entire time that we're there. And I've never been to Ayana, so that is a place that I would very much like to go and see. I have gone down as far as Ayu Pavlo, and I think to Nea Skiti, but I don't think I've ever been to Ayan, and that's all in the kind of the desert of the Holy Mountain, right? Kind of at the furthest, closest to the peak and the furthest east area. So let's keep talking.
Okay, sure.
And then, Father, do you go every couple years or?
It was pretty much like clockwork, about every 3 years. But my last trip was in 2017, so it's almost been 5 years now, I think. I went with 3 clergy and 2 doctors. Well, Dr. Porter teaches theology, and then my cousin, who is a virtual reality tenured professor in Amherst, University of Massachusetts Amherst. So it was a pretty intellectual group, but it was a great trip. Yeah, wonderful wonderful and a great experience. But that was, yeah, it's about 5 years ago now. So I'm due. That's the
Yeah,
point.
it's over.
Presbyterian and all the family as well?
We are. She has made a choice in her life to work towards becoming a medical massage therapist. So she's in a course of study right now at a school here in Reading, which is quite well known, and it just happens to be 10 minutes from our home. She's doing really well in it. It's a little bit like being in medical school. She's gone through all the systems of the body, very intense studies, but now she's in a little bit more of the hands-on internship. So the school also is connected to a spa, and now she's been going and doing, beginning to do massage there. And she's even had people that she's begun to treat here in our home. And she's very good at it. People love her. People keep coming back for her and requesting her, which is an encouragement to her. It's not quite certain which way to take it once she gets licensed. Maybe in a hospital setting, maybe helping out with like patients who are struggling with cancer or something.
I know when I was going through the radiation, they said, there's certain massage therapists that are trained in this on how to give you and others aren't. So just kind of be careful. So
Yeah.
I never did that before, but that's neat.
It is a special unit of study that she would have to tack on and pursue to be able to then. But it seems to have so many applications, and it's just on the brink of really being embraced and accepted more by the medical community at large as a true kind of healing discipline. There's so much to it that I never understood or realized. It's not just rubbing the skin. It's what the therapists understand to do, that have to do with the fascia, that have to do with the different systems in the body, that it has great results. And there's the person who's the head of the school he's just a healer. He has a great gift and a great love, and it's been an inspiration for her. So.
And hopefully she gets to practice on you. So that's very nice.
And that's begun to happen. Yeah. But it goes both ways. Basically, she shows me what she likes as well, and then I get to practice on her a little bit.
Nice. Well, good for her taking that on.
Our daughter Anna and her husband Andy and little baby Stevie spent this past week moving from San Diego, California to Granville, Michigan. So they're living now in the same town as Fotini and Demetrius.
Oh my gracious.
Little baby Theodora. And our daughter, our youngest Zoe, when she graduates sometime this summer, will probably end up there. So by the end of the summer, 3 of our children will all be in Michigan, near Grand Rapids.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's another big thing that's happening to us.
How wonderful for them and for the kids to have little cousins. And
yeah, I mean, Anna and Andy were in such a beautiful city and a beautiful place in San Diego, but it just meant more to them to want to be closer to family. So
Sure, that's great.
And you are well, and your boys are well, and
we are Costa quarantined for a week because he tested positive for COVID in Florence, but never got sick. And he's really loving living over there.
Sure.
Anthony's doing well with work and just needs to meet some more people down there, but he's gone.
And he's in Missoula.
He's in Boulder, Colorado,
Boulder. Has
just
he,
north
does,
of Denver.
oh, right. I don't know why I was thinking Missoula. Something was Missoula.
He
He
was
was there
for an
Yeah, that's
internship
what it
on
was.
summer.
last summer.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
he's doing well, and thank God everything's okay. So looks like they're gonna go over for a week and visit the cathedral that Draco worked on,
How exciting.
see the Archbishop, so God willing. Another time for Mount Athos. It was even beyond getting the blessing, just the dynamics of the travel was the logistics. It was a lot.
Yeah.
for a week. And
My oldest sister is wanting for a gift to take her one and only son, our oldest nephew, to Greece, but also to Albania, because we went to Albania, if you recall, many years ago, my mom's 75th birthday, as a gift for her. And our relatives that all live now in Tirana, although the home's still in Albania, are wanting not only to meet them there, but wanting them to show them around Tirana, and they're going to vacation together. But when you're over there, I know that they would love to just even say hi. I don't know if Anna Maria works at the Archdiocese anymore, but a couple of the other cousins live in Tirana. One of them is named Anesti, and he has a wife, Anna, who speaks English and Italian, and as well as Albanian.
And did they work for church at all?
Just my cousin Anna Maria, who worked for the Archbishop right there in the.
In the chapel.
She worked at the Archdiocese. Yeah, she was like the receptionist there.
Yeah, I don't know if she's still there, but there was an Anesti that worked at the office, but I'm sure it's
No,
a
it's somebody else. But I'll just send you the contact information, and then you only if it's something that you would want to do. Your time may be somewhat limited there, and yeah, so many people who are probably still over there. So
They're your relatives, your nephews?
my mother lived the first 5 years of her life in a town just across the border into Albania from Greece called Tirana. I'm sorry, Sotira, and she was raised by an uncle because her father was over here in America making a way of life for himself so he could bring his family over. And she and her mother, my grandmother, came over on one of the last boats to leave Albania before the border was closed. But the rest of the family, the cousins that she was raised with, all grew up there, and their children, when we were living in Thessaloniki, left the country while the borders were still closed, and you had guards with machine guns every mile, and they came across the border anyways and came all the way to Thessaloniki to meet us for the first time because they heard we were there. And since then we've had communication with them, and my mother for years and years and years kept in touch with them and would help them out because they really lived in very difficult circumstance. And still Anesti actually came and lived in America for a couple of years, worked for my father. We all became very close with him, so he's almost like another brother. And so he's since that time he's married, has a couple of children, so he really wants to reconnect and have everyone get to know his family a little better. It doesn't look possible for President and I to join them, but it looks like my brother and a couple of his children, and my sister and her son, and maybe one or two of my children. Maybe Fotinia and Demetrius are going to be over at Ionian Village anyways, so they may then join us with the group. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Wonderful. You still keep in touch.
So great to see you, and
Good to see you too. Father.
I will forward to you the first 3 sessions with the passcodes. We're recording them. Oh, and I'm still recording. So now I have to go back and take all of this off.